Our community is doing so many amazing things. It truly is. It's hard to keep up with all of them. And it's so impressive how people are thinking and how people are innovating and how people are, opening up inclusive financial opportunities or inclusive investment opportunities or, just access. It's really amazing where it's come even in the past 6 to 9 months.
That is Keli Callaghan, and this is episode 32 of the Blockchain Pro podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Blockchain Pro podcast. I'm Adriana and today's guest is Keli Callaghan. Keli is the VP of Marketing at Algorand, one of the hottest, most interesting blockchain networks that launched last year. In this episode, we discussed Keli's communications background, how her family competitiveness led her to mine Bitcoin in the early days, as well as the challenges of building Algorand's global community. Let's get to know Keli.
Hi, Keli. Good morning, Adriana. Good evening to you. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, thank you so much for waking up early to talk to me. It's a little bit late here, but that's perfect time for Adriana the owl.
This is a perfect time for morning Keli, so this works out well.
Excellent. It's the end of summer for you there, right? Is it?
It is. We're getting into fall. It's getting a little cooler here in the northern part of the U.S., which is unfortunate. And in the current state of affairs with the global pandemic, everyone's starting to come inside, so things are starting to get small and tight again a little bit.
Oh my gosh. You in Boston as well?
I am. I'm just outside the city. Our Algorand is based here in Boston, and we have 50 or 60 employees who are all within driving distance of the city. Yeah.
That's nice. I love Boston. It's like my second favorite city in America, New York being the first, of course, because I lived there many, many years ago.
Oh, New York is too big. Boston is the perfect size, but I have to say that I was born and raised here. I'll probably never leave. I like traveling and I like being able to go out and about and see new people and experience new ideas, but I like coming back home here.
Oh, I understand completely. It's a beautiful place. I have family in Cambridge, so it's my base when I go there.
There you go.
Not very far from MIT, so yay.
Just down the street. That's right. We know it well.
Exactly. Let's dive into it and go back to a little bit of background. So you're a Bostonian? You grew up
there? Grew up near Boston. I went to college closer to New York City at Fairfield, did my undergrad there, came back to Boston, went to BC, Boston College for my MBA here in Boston. I've been here ever since. Love it here. And, education, love the Jesuits and the Jesuit education that I've had. It's still here.
What is the Jesuits for, the non-Americans?
Jesuit, a group of people that are really specialized in education. They have a number of universities globally, and sort of they instill a lot of liberal arts, and it's a different sort of approach to education. Some of the schools here have
all the good stuff. Then
all the good stuff.
More fun.
You could say that.
Awesome. And did you always know you wanted to be in marketing? How did that come about?
No, I studied a lot of communications, a lot of global communications. That sort of happened after I decided that being an architect was not going to work out. I studied art history for a long time. I lived in Italy studying art history, wanted to be an architect. That was my big goal and my big dream. And then decided I didn't have quite the right mentality for it and the eye for the creative design aspect. So marketing was sort of a natural fit to come after that, and did a lot of marketing communications and creative work and branding and numbers and data analysis after that, and sort of wound up in marketing.
Is there any particular area of marketing that you like the most?
I think it's hard to say that. I think there's so many aspects of marketing that all meld together, and one part doesn't work without the other part working well. So I think, for me, it's more about making them all sing and less about any particular part. For me, it's more fun to watch them all work in harmony, right? Instead of just one part versus another.
All right. And how did you come to work in the blockchain space?
Yeah, so my background in blockchain is not long and deep. My career has spanned several startups, software, SaaS-based companies, all in the tech space for the most part, but nothing in blockchain up until about 2.5 years now when I joined Algorand. I think, I'm sure that many people have their first stories of Bitcoin or crypto. Mine goes back to probably 2015, 2016. My husband and I both come from very, very big families with lots of siblings. There's a lot of competitiveness that comes along with that. And I believe it started as one of those things where it was a competition to see who could buy it, who could mine it for the least amount of money. And so between my husband and I, my brother, that's where it started. And then, so I've had some Bitcoin for some amount of time. I also have a funny story where in 2017, we were in the midst of a construction project that was going over budget, as many construction projects do. And we said, well, we're sitting on some Bitcoin. Let's get rid of some Bitcoin. So I was one of those few people that sold their Bitcoin at $20,000. Good. Purely by accident. It
was good timing that, you needed for your project at that moment in time.
That's right. So that was Bitcoin. And then, and so my career has always been in marketing and comms. I've always really liked doing things with companies that haven't been done before, right? So working with leadership that is open to taking an approach that's very new and very different, and sort of not from a normal marketing playbook or go-to-market playbook. And that's what I really loved about the opportunity here at Algorand.
So did you interview for this job, or did you, happen to meet them at a meetup? And, like many things happen, in this tiny space that it's now growing.
Yeah. They were looking for a few people when it came to marketing, community building, when Algorand was first getting started. So this was, again, 2.5 years ago, before Algorand had launched. It was a very small team. It was Silvio and Steve and Sean. I had known Sean for some amount of time from a previous life. And when I met Silvio, Steve, and Sean and heard about what they were doing, you couldn't help but want to be a part of it, right? You have Silvio, who's just thinking is so different and logical and makes sense, right? And his impressive mind. And then you've got Steve that has a very logical business head on his shoulder. Same thing with Sean. And they were all like really open and wanting to be creative and wanting to be, do something big when they took this out to market. And I just loved how open they were and how the approach was very different from what was out there. And that was what got me involved here.
And what has been like one of your biggest challenges in launching a new cryptocurrency? I'm sure there's many.
It's hard to name just one.
Okay, let's you then. No problem.
Yeah, let's go down that path. So let's see. First of all, it's still new, right? It was still new 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and the fact that it's so new makes it hard to like message it, right? Like, do you talk about the tech? Do you talk about what it does? Do you talk about what it enables? And so being able to wrap your head around it, I can get technical and hands-on. I like that aspect of it, but I'm not a blockchain developer. I'm not an engineer. And so just trying to grasp what the tech is doing. And, you know, when I first came to Algorand, I was handed Silvio's 72-page white paper on Algorand and go read this and then market it. And it's, in case you haven't read Silvio's white paper, there's a lot of math equations. It is very complicated. It is written by like multiple PhDs out of the MIT space, and so that's what. So I'm sitting there, and I remember being up late at night, like reading this paper and trying to like sift through how you're going to message this and talk about this. And so I think, you know, we've come a long way, because I think most people understand the basics of blockchain, and so things have become a little bit easier to some extent, but man, even back 2 years ago, that's what marketing was. It was trying to understand the nuances and the bells and whistles of the tech so that you could understand what it was going to do and what the key use cases were, right? Because that's what people could wrap their heads around. I think we've come a long way since then. You know, people understand blockchain, people understand the importance of global scale, they understand the importance of it, you know, not forking, not being able to fall over. They understand the importance of security and true decentralization and all those really important components of blockchain and what that backbone really enables. So, you know, now we focus more, we've got so much going on in terms of, you know, a year out from our launch. We've got a ton of adoption going on. So I love right now, instead of highlighting and talking about the tech, right? Flashback to me 2 years ago, staying up late at night, reading through white papers and jotting down stuff on whiteboards. And now, you know, I have these awesome use cases that people are actually doing and working on Algorand. And I love shining a spotlight on that, because that's so much more interesting than like how it's really impacting people's lives or organizations' efficiencies or what have you. Like, that's far more interesting.
What are some of these use cases, for example?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. So, you know, the payments and transactions, the basic stuff, we've got a bunch of those. There's also really interesting sort of new digital asset class types, whether that's you take Props. Props is a company that's doing like a loyalty token and rewarding people for the stake they have in their network. That's really interesting. You've got Republic that's tokenizing new asset classes, Reg securities on Algorand. That's really compelling. They're doing that with Securitized. We're involved in a number of CBDC projects globally with countries that are really at the forefront. You know, the Marshall Islands is a very small one. That one's going on Algorand. There's a couple others that I think we'll hear about in the near future. But there's just a lot of innovation and really interesting ways of how, you know, countries are trying to enable businesses and openness and more effective and efficient ways for people in their countries to do business. So there's a lot going on. I mean, we've got tons on our website. I could go on for a long time, but there's a lot of really cool stuff.
So, okay, without getting too technical, and because you have like a Bitcoin background, what is the main difference between Bitcoin and Algorand? I mean, apart from Algorand having figureheads that Bitcoin doesn't really.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I think, you know, the early generation stuff that came out, Bitcoin being one of them, super compelling, right? And really interesting uses of cryptography, of computer science, of economics, and all of that. I think the problem is with some of those early generation ones is that they were just that. They were first generation attempts at like really complicated technology. And you'll hear Silvio talk about this too, like what he saw coming out of that, and not just Bitcoin, but some of the other early ones, really interesting approaches, but there was something inherently wrong with them, right? Like they couldn't scale, or they weren't actually secure enough for something to happen, or they weren't gonna be able to enable payments for the entire economy of several major countries all at once, right? So he stepped back, he loved those. He stepped back and said, these are amazing, but there's flaws with them, and I think that this should be designed slightly differently. And that's where he came up with Algorand. And, you know, there used to be this thing called the trilemma, where you can't have scalability, speed and scalability, security and decentralization all at the same time. And so Silvio's goal was to make sure that those were all possible. And he's done that. You know, we've got our throughput of transactions on Algorand are unbelievably fast right now. They're going to be increased by about tenfold in the coming months. So just the speed and scalability of being able to do all of that, the security, like Algorand's verified not to fork, unlike some of the earlier stuff. And then the decentralization aspect. So I think when you look at Bitcoin, I think one of the problems with Bitcoin is just how long it takes to do a transaction, right? Like that, there's no way that you're gonna take your phone in to get a cup of coffee and wait 60 minutes for that transaction to go through so that you can get your cup of coffee. So, you know, I think the early stuff is awesome. I think there's still purposes and use cases for those, but I think when it comes to more of the day-to-day and more of the sophisticated stuff, I think some of the next generation blockchains, Algorand included, are gonna provide more backbones for some interesting things here.
Yeah, I think for businesses that don't require the censorship resistance that Bitcoin offers, definitely there's some really interesting technologies that are coming through now.
Yeah, and it's fun to see. It's fun to see sort of the next wave of what's happening, and then what's being built on top of it, and how, you know, some of the approaches are working, some of them aren't. How you know, there's new stuff, there's innovation going on, and I think we haven't even begun to see what's going to be what's going to happen with some of the more sophisticated smart contract tooling and languages and what happens there.
Oh yeah, there's heaps being developed in this space as well.
Yeah.
Okay, switching gears, how are you enjoying building a new community? That's a huge task.
It's a huge task for sure. And we partner with the Algorand Foundation on a lot of that too, because they have some great grant programs. They have some amazing ambassador programs. I think they're up to nearly 500 ambassadors for Algorand from about 64 some odd countries globally. So, you know, I think through some lenses, like the tech has spoken for itself. And a lot of people have seen, you know, we've got some really technical people that are, you know, not only working at the foundation, but that are also supporting us through ambassador programs, through building on Algorand. And I think people that are really deep into the tech have an easier time deciphering like what's really interesting and what's maybe not as interesting. And I think that's why we've seen a lot of traction from some of those community type programs, like the ambassador program, out of the gate, because those groups have recognized sort of the differences and the potential that Algorand's approach and technology has. So our community's been great. They're out supporting, they're out talking, they're out leveraging our SDKs, they're out meeting with our DevRel team. They're doing a lot to really grow what we're doing and share the good word about all the stuff that's possible with Algorand.
Do you have any ambassadors in Australia yet?
We do. We have a number of ambassadors in Australia. Yeah.
Oh, where do we find information about them?
You know what? That's a great question. I will hook you up with them when we get off of this call. With there being so many, I can't keep everyone straight. But I'll be sure I can put you in touch with them.
Oh, that's great. And I will add, to the show notes as well. So people that listen to this and want to get in touch, they can. All right. So do you ever find yourself explaining crypto to your friends and family? You know, everyone explains it differently. What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think the US is a little bit further behind than a lot of other countries in the world. So I think, you know, when I talk to friends, and I think so. I think that, I think that there are countries in the world that are far more open to crypto than the US, but that's, you know, neither here nor there. My point is that I think when you talk to people outside the US, it's a little bit easier to explain in some regards. I think here, you know, there's a little bit of a hesitation. Now, that being said, Boston has they've always had a very healthy tech scene. Obviously, it's a very healthy fintech community with all the stuff going on here. So Boston's a good place for all this stuff. Yes, I do find myself explaining crypto and blockchain it's funny depending on age, demographic, and background and career in terms of what path you take. I found that there's a lot, whether you explain that it's like the new internet, whether you go down to basics, it's like, well, I can send you information over the internet very easily, but I couldn't send you anything of value. Like I couldn't send you $1 easily unless we were standing next to each other and I handed you an actual dollar bill, right? So whether you explain the value versus information flow, or you explain, the early days of the internet, you explain how payments and transactions were. I've found that there's like a variety of different approaches that you take based on just where someone's background and what they usually understand.
That makes sense. Yeah, this conversation can take 2 minutes or 2 hours, depending on how deep do you want to get into it.
That's right. That's right.
And, one thing that I am missing very much because of COVID that, we can't have in-person meetups is that aspect of just having meetups every week and then talking about it every week and answering the same questions in slightly different ways. So yeah, I'm really missing that part.
Yeah, the in-person, it's funny. So here at Algorand, we did our very first in-person event, I guess. It was very small with La Jafie in Paris. It was yesterday, and the team was sending me photos, and there were, people were spread out and everyone was in masks and it was all very compliant, but people were sending photos over of the event, and it made me miss in-person things even more.
Didn't you have some launch of some sort maybe a couple of months ago or something like that? Maybe 3 months ago?
We had we've had a couple of big things over the past couple months. Let's see, we did a significant protocol upgrade in August that the most notable thing was probably stateless and stateful smart contracts. So that was a big one. Rekeying and some other features were in there, like almost, I call it like a password reset, but being able to rekey your account, your private keys. And, USDC coming to Algorand. Algorand's going to be the second chain after Ethereum that USDC moves to. That's been big news. We've got some great stuff going on with Blockstack. We're collaborating with them on an open source smart contract language, sort of a more advanced, more sophisticated smart contract language. So there's some amazing stuff going on there. The Blockstack team is great. And obviously we've got an amazing research team here. When you talk about layer 2 and offline smart contracts and what the potential is, I think we'll see a lot there in the coming years. And then, yeah, like and then there've been a bunch of adoption use cases that, migrating from other chains, standing up brand new opportunities. We've got a lot of regulated assets that are on Algorand. The first FCA regulated exchange, Archax is coming and building on Algorand, decentralized infrastructure. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, I think I have to catch up on my reading.
I can barely keep up. Honestly, you talk about community building. Our community is doing so many amazing things. It truly is. It's hard to keep up with all of them. And it's so impressive how people are thinking and how people are innovating and how people are, opening up inclusive financial opportunities or inclusive investment opportunities or, just access. It's really amazing where it's come even in the past 6 to 9 months.
That's amazing. So what advice would you give to marketers wanting to break into the crypto space?
Marketers in crypto, I think that's it's a good question. I think you have to have a mentality that is just to uncover what's possible, right? You need to have mentality where you're going to break away from what the norm is from a marketing perspective and do something different. And we've done all kinds of fun things here at Algorand from a marketing perspective. And, that ranges from, we sent a weather balloon up into space with our logo on it. I spent a day like sending this huge weather balloon. It went like 1.5 miles over the earth. And then we spent several hours chasing it as it came down with drop cams on it. So, that's one, but that was, we had a lot of people that really loved that. And that was just a very techie nerdy thing that we do when we launched. We've done a bunch of other really cool things, and there's so many new platforms out there to try, and there's so many new things from a marketing perspective to try and engage people with. And obviously COVID has presented its own new set of challenges, which are just, I mean, you know, I think to be successful in marketing in blockchain and crypto, you have to just be very open-minded and very willing to try lots of new things.
I always end my presentations with a slide that say, "There's hope if you're curious."
Yeah. If you want to take on something that's never been done before, if you want to try something that's never been done before, and, you know, think bigger than you've ever, you know, maybe in previous organizations or worlds, think bigger than you've been allowed to think before, right? And there's so much opportunity. So it's a great place to be for someone that is open-minded, wants to think big and do things differently.
100%. That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome, Adriana. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to, when this is all over, making my way down to Australia so we can do this in person.
Oh man, we'll party.
There we go.
Awesome. Thanks, Keli.
Thanks. Bye.
And that was the fascinating Keli Callaghan. To get in touch with Keli or to find out more about Algorand, follow the links in the description. Let her know you enjoyed this episode. And remember, if you'd like to reach out to me directly, head over to Blockchain Pro Podcast and send me a message, connect on LinkedIn or on Twitter. It is always a pleasure to read your messages and get your feedback, so keep them coming. If you have been on this journey with me for a while, I would love if you would take a second to review the show, whatever platform you get this from. That will make my day, and I will give you a shout out at the next episode. How about that? All right, that's all from me for now. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Remember to keep stacking those sats, and I will see you at the next block. Bye.